Just so that you know, I am totally stoked about this conversation coming up. That's first of all. Welcome to Jay Moore's new JBiz Health Innovation Series, featuring accomplished leaders in healthcare and who are developing and using innovative approaches to healthcare. I'm your host, Gary Stein. The JBiz Health Innovation Series is brought to you by Nemphos Brow, the Mid-Atlantic's leading boutique corporate law firm, supporting corporate growth at every stage of business. Nemphos Brow specializes in corporate, business, startup, and entrepreneurial law, and its team has extensive experience in the areas of intellectual property, mergers and acquisitions, and general counsel practices. Learn more about Nemphos Brow at nemphosbrow.com. I am excited, and our guests are fabulous. Today, Max Sobel and Stephen Wallman, owners of the appropriately named Max and Stevens, a purveyor of CBD products, premium hemp extracts, joins us here on the podcast. Gentlemen, welcome in.
Thank you for having us.
How are you?
Absolutely. Happy holidays to everybody.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
To give people a little context about CBD, about the industry in general, we'll talk about that in a minute, but from the entrepreneurial aspect first, just a couple of questions. Who are you guys? How did you guys meet one another? Steve, we'll start with you.
We met probably in homeroom school at Pikesville Middle.
Wow.
Maybe 7th grade, I think.
So 12, 13 years old.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we were friendly throughout high school. That's how we met.
Same story?
Yeah, same
Sticking to
exact.
it?
Yeah, same exact story. Not much of a memory from back then, but I know that I've known him, as long as that.
So that's about 30 years, give or take 30, 33 years. Had you guys stayed in contact all that time, or how did your relationship develop?
Well, off and on a little bit. Steve actually spent a lot of time growing up here in Baltimore, and I actually moved to Philly. I went to school out there, and I spent about 20 years out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I moved back here, we reconnected, sort of stayed in touch, and decided to venture into business together.
Mm-hmm. So you were in different businesses before you got into business. What did you do before you got into the CBD
Right.
business?
I've always been in sales, some sort of sales business development business. So I was previously in a software company, which I was there for about 12 years, grew it internationally. It was exciting. But I wasn't really emotionally attached or personally connected to IT. It was a business opportunity that I was, that I found and was able to use my skills to grow in that company. So Max, in his background, also did some writing about how he grew companies that he worked in.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot of similarities in our belief of how to grow a company.
And Max, what did you actually do beforehand?
Technology, ad tech. I've actually been in the startup and entrepreneurial scene for quite some time. Had some wins, had some losses, but generally speaking, very, very familiar with building companies and expanding them and really doing things that way.
So did you kind of take the lead a little bit in terms of entrepreneuring this company, or was it like a joint?
I wouldn't say so. I'd say that Stephen and I were both looking for the same sort of thing, and we decided to collaborate and use complementary skills.
And you've been in the CBD business for now how long?
About 3 years. We launched our first product in March, but it took us about 2.5 years to make sure it was legitimate and find out really what the need in the marketplace was.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is a good entry point to talk about what CBD is. So
Sure.
I'll just throw it over to you, Max. What is CBD? I know people have heard about it.
Sure.
They've read about it. What exactly is it?
So cannabidiol is the name of the molecule. It's medicinal. It's beneficial to your health. It's got a lot of properties that are very beneficial to a lot of things. Stephen has a better idea talking about it. He's very good about actually talking about CBD and the actual way that it interacts with your body. So I'm going to kick it over to him.
Okay.
Yeah, so CBD is one of the molecules of the cannabis plant. And it's one of the many molecules that have been shown in studies to help, not only in pet studies or animal studies, but human studies for a lot of different conditions.
So when you say the cannabis plant, you're talking about marijuana. Is that true?
Right. So it's more of a legal term, marijuana. And the legal term is based off of the molecules that are present in the plant. And it's all measured around THC. And don't ask me to pronounce that. But THC,
Yeah, seriously. Right.
That's the short term, and it's what most people know about.
I think most people know
and it's
that.
the part that gets you high.
Right.
If it goes above 0.3% in the plant, it's legally considered marijuana and federally illegal. Only able to be consumed under a state that has a program for it, whether it's recreational or a medical program. Hemp, on the other side, is a cannabis plant or a legally termed hemp plant if it's below 0.3% of THC.
Gotcha. So just to backtrack for a second so that people understand, because I'm learning too, okay? Cannabis is up here. That's
Right.
the plant.
Correct.
If it has a certain amount of THC, it becomes marijuana.
Correct.
If it has less less than a certain amount, it's hemp.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And hemp is federally legal under the Farm Bill of 2018.
That's right. That's what I was going to ask. So marijuana is not federally legal,
Correct.
but it's statewide legal in certain states around the country.
Yes.
It is
Yes.
not legal in the state of Maryland at this point. Correct.
It is under the medical
Under-
program.
right, under the
Correct.
medical program, but
Yes.
it's not just.
It's not a
right.
It's not
recreationally
recreational.
approved.
Right.
Right.
But CBD, but hemp, right, which is where CBD comes from, is
Yes.
federally legal.
Right.
Yes, hemp
Okay.
is correct.
Right.
As long as it's sourced from industrial hemp, it's federally
Right.
legal.
And I'm going to just assume for a moment that our viewers can see this Max and Stevens product that we have here. And it says premium hemp extracts on the product. So we're really going to be. We're gonna talk about everything,
Sure.
but we're gonna really be talking about premium. We're really gonna be talking about premium hemp extracts. Okay, so just as a general overview, real quick, when people, especially of my generation, your generation, you guys are a few years younger than me, but I'm 58 years old at this point. Smoked pot when I was a kid. We had a pre-conversation. I know that you guys did too. When we hear CBD, okay, just the general population may have some skepticism about it. It's something new. What is it exactly? Is it legal? Is it illegal? Right? All this kind of
Right.
stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you tell the general population about your product? What do you say to, I don't know, make them feel better about? I don't even know what they need to feel, but what do you tell people about your product?
People fall into two different categories. You either have someone who is a cannabis user or has used it in the past, and they're not afraid of it, but they just don't understand what role it plays in their body and their wellness. And then there's other people that avoid it like the plague, like it's the devil's lettuce, regardless, they don't want to hear anything. And of course, the approaches will be different for both.
Yeah, I mean, we generally just like to give them sort of an understanding of it. We tell them it's the non-psychoactive form of the cannabis plant, essentially all the medicinal benefits of cannabis, but none of the high. So from our perspective, that's how we sort of qualify a person and really determine where they need to go.
Okay, so that's a good place. So you don't get high from CBD.
Correct.
What do you get from CBD?
Well, it depends. So anecdotal evidence, and I can think from our customer base, I mean, they use it from everything from sleep to pain management to inflammation issues. Anxiety. People are using it topically for things like eczema and psoriasis. It's funny. We hear stories all the time of people finding different uses for it and getting benefits from it.
Where can you get CBD?
CBD's popping up everywhere. And it's a molecule, so you can get soap, shampoo, bath bombs, tinctures. You can get hemp flowers at different spots, but there's CBD popping up everywhere.
There's probably many different places to get it at, like you say, like a brick and mortar store or online or whatever.
Yes.
What's different about Max and Stevens CBD as opposed to somebody else's CBD?
I'm glad you asked that question.
Great question.
It's an unregulated industry, so it's buyer beware of all aspects. And most companies, because it is unregulated, there's a lot of different ways that you can cut corners, and most companies do. Some of the top brands have gotten letters from the FDA already with making false claims and short filling their bottle. So saying they're selling 500 milligrams, but in actual testing it's 300. When we set this business up, we knew that we had to put our name and face on this business to be accountable and credible, and that's what was needed in this business. So I forgot the question at this point. But
How is yours different? How is your
right?
CBD
So
different?
what we do in this environment, which is different, is one, we don't mix anything with the hemp. Our approach is to get a whole plant extract and make sure it's thoroughly tested and safe, so there's no side effects from pesticides or heavy metals. Put it in a bottle so it's easily consumed and help people understand it. And that actually separates us from a lot of companies because we're not trying to go for a proprietary formula or target any specific condition. We really just purify that product, the hemp plant, and allow people to safely experiment to see if it's going to help them with whatever condition that they're dealing with.
Let me add to that. So hemp is federally legal, but not federally regulated. So the onus is on the companies themselves to actually do our own testing and make sure that we have a quality product. So one of the differentiators with us is our extensive testing and thorough lab report. People hear about lab reports all the time. We've seen some, we haven't seen some, but at the end of the day, that's a huge differentiator.
So when you talk about lab stuff, you actually have a lab report right here. And we talked about this before we started here on air, that every every batch that you guys produce contains a lab report, which you put on your website so that potential customers, clients can take a look at the nature of what that batch is, and then they can make a more informed decision as if they're going to buy.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, a minute ago, I heard one of you say that other CBD companies potentially put additives in their products, such as metals and things like that. So that's not pure CBD oil. Correct?
Right. So they don't add in the metals,
Yeah.
but they buy hemp that is grown under conditions that may produce heavy metals, but they don't pay the extra money to have it lab tested and certified from a third party to make sure that it's not present in there. So that's the risk is, where are they getting the hemp from? Just like you would want to know where your food comes from,
right,
where your vegetables come from, where your lettuce comes from with the whole E. coli scare. It's a plant. It's the same, same susceptibility to constituents, harmful.
So lab reports, I mean, it's a buzzword right now. People are actually starting to understand that they need to look for lab reports, but there's a real difference in the industry. I mean, you can spend a little bit on a lab report, you can spend a lot on a lab report. Our process is different in that not only do we lab test it once we actually extract the product, but then once it's bottled and finished, we send it to an additional third-party independent lab that runs a thorough set of tests, arguably some of the best in the business, and that's what we've heard.
So you lab test it twice before it actually goes to market.
The partners, we don't own
At
farms
least.
and we don't own the labs. So everyone we work with provides us with lab tests. So we trust them and see it. But to make sure, so we can sleep at night, we send it after all that process is finished and we've seen their labs. We send it to a completely third party in Florida that does an analysis. And that gives us the final test for us before we go to market.
We reject more batches than we actually approve.
Really?
And for something to actually come across our desks and be something that we're comfortable with, only at that point do we stamp the Max and Stevens label on it. That's very important to us. We have to sleep at night.
Absolutely. Talk about the regulation here. So CBD is not regulated at this point.
Right.
I'm sure it will be at some time.
Yes.
Is that good or bad?
I mean, it's good for consumer protection. It's good to have some oversight over an industry and keep everyone honest. Obviously, at the same time, there's reasonable regulation, and we want to be part of that discussion to make sure that they're not going to over-regulate a specific industry, which then doesn't protect and in the benefit of the consumer. So I think there's a middle ground there with consumers and businesses, and to find a middle ground with regulators on making sure that the product is safe and overseen for consumers.
So in terms of regulation, which is eventually going to come because it basically comes everywhere to everything, are you guys organized? Do you have a national association or some type of representation that is trying to make way for this thing to happen?
Yeah, there's a national organization that we're actually members of, and then we're already looking into some sort of statewide organization that we'd like to join at some point. The industry is new-ish, and we're waiting to make sure that a credible player shows themselves so that we can align ourselves with them.
Okay, we'll take a quick break here. Just want to remind everybody that this is the JBiz Health Innovation Series. It's brought to you by Nemphos Brow, the Mid-Atlantic's leading boutique corporate law firm supporting corporate growth of every stage of business. Nemphos Brow specializes in corporate, business, startup, and entrepreneurial law, and its team has extensive experience in the areas of intellectual property, mergers and acquisitions, and general counsel practices. Learn more about Nemphos Brow at nemphosbrow.com. Okay, let's continue on with the CBD conversation. We've got Max Sobol, Stephen Wallman from Max and Stevens, appropriately named. Here is a sample look at their product, very nicely boxed and merchandised, I should say. I like the colors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will also tell people that at this point, I actually tried CBD for the first time ever today, about 5 minutes before we went on air. Max, or I should say, Stephen, you were so kind as to put a dropper underneath my tongue. I feel great. I have a lot of energy. I'll tell you that. I have a lot of energy anyways, but it's interesting. It actually tastes like marijuana, okay?
Right.
So it did have that flavor, that taste. So thank you for that, first of all.
Appreciate it.
But getting back to the actual CBD, how do people take it, and how much should they take?
Well, we'll talk about our product because there's a million different form factors out there of CBD. So we formulated in an MCT oil, which stands for medium chain triglycerides. It's an extract of coconut oil. A lot of health and wellness experts use it for making bulletproof coffee, if you've heard of that. So it's a small molecule that absorbs well by the body. So we mix it in that. So we have a high concentration. It's 50 milligrams per milliliter, which is a good way of comparing it across the industry. And depending on your condition, would dictate how you would use it. But the basis is getting it in your bloodstream underneath your tongue, sublingually, letting it sit there for about a minute. We'll get in that way. You can also apply it topically. So joint pains, muscle pains, you can put a few drops on the skin, rub it in, follow it by another cream. And you can also mix it with food. It's fat soluble, so you would mix it with something fatty like avocado, hummus, some sort of oil, coconut oil. Some people do that as well. You can also use it for pets. It's safe for pets to put on a pet treat or directly in their mouth. And also safe for kids since there's no side effects or no psychoactive properties.
So I just want to be clear, and I want to make sure that our audience is clear about this. You're not saying that medically you can cure something with CBD. If somebody wrote to you and asked you a question and say, I have X disease or whatever, you're not saying that this is your cure.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
So, but you are saying, though, that it could help you deal with it. It could help you deal with pain, things like that.
Yeah, people have an issue with pharmaceuticals. People have some side effects. They're looking for alternative solutions. They're looking for more natural solutions. That's where we come in. It's one of those things where it's try it, see what it does for you.
If you, a couple questions. Can it help if somebody is addicted to alcohol? Oh, we have a phone call here that we are trying to get rid of.
Let's get that caller on the line. Yeah. What can we do for you, caller?
I think it's Max from Pikesville. No, you're Max from Pikesville. If somebody is addicted to alcohol or so, does it help with an addiction? Can you take a drop of CBD oil?
Yeah, it's a good topic,
question.
and there is no recreational market for CBD, and it's not habit forming, so you don't feel anything from it per se, like a high or a buzz per se. But it does help reduce inflammation in the body, and sometimes when the body gets inflamed, it has a response to an active mind to reach for something, whether it's a cigarette, alcohol, drugs. This is a great tool to use in place of something else that may be harmful. So almost as a harm reduction technology or tool, if you will, to begin with, at the least. It's proven to be safer from those products. So that's really a good opportunity for someone to say, hey, if I need a tool to help me that is natural, perfect to try.
I mean, anecdotally, we hear stories all the time that it helps people with cravings. So
really?
You can interpret that as you like, but we hear it all. We don't make medical claims because we can't, but we hear anecdotally all sorts of amazing things.
Right. And just to contrast it with marijuana, if you use marijuana, which is higher in THC, you typically get an appetite. They call it the munchies, which we've heard of. CBD is a little different than that. It actually settles the stomach and can reduce appetite. So there's a complementary relationship between the two, and that's why experimenting and finding out how every person's body works is important because everyone's different, and it's not like a prescribed drug that's going to say you take this much and this is what it's going to do. There just really hasn't been the research and studies to be that specific.
So obviously people can go online to Max and Stevens and they can find out about the CBD products, purchase the CBD products. But by the same token, I was in the mall the other night shopping for holiday gifts, and you know how you walk down the corridors of the mall and you've got all these kiosks that just pop up like right in the middle of the corridor. There were a few different kiosks that popped up that were selling CBD oil, and I just looked at it, didn't pay as close attention as probably I should have. But my point is like you could get it there, like you can get it
at a gas station.
Get it at a gas station.
Yeah, and they also sell sushi at gas stations. You probably wouldn't.
I totally get it, but I'm saying are those products in those places as pure as this product, or do you not know?
Well, so buyer beware, right? We say that all the time. Buyer beware. Always look for a reputable company. Always look for a very substantial lab report. We get the question all the time, why don't you guys make gummies? Why don't you guys make pet treats,
edibles,
etc.?
right.
Yeah. So our answer is simply this. Our whole formula is a whole plant extract. It's a holistic type of formula and a holistic type of extraction. We don't want to mix it with sugar. We don't want to mix it with other things that you may or may not care to have in your diet. As far as pet treats are concerned, people are very specific of what they want to feed their pets. That's why our specific formula and the way that we have it, it's an oil, and that oil can be added to food. It can be taken sublingually. It can be used topically. We don't mess around with those things. So to your point about the different kiosks and such, what you typically see is you see gummies, you see balms, you see creams. our opinion of those products without actually digging into them, and we've dug into a lot, is A, it's questionable how much CBD is actually in the product. B, it's questionable what the additional additives are in there. So in the case of like topicals, you could have capsaicin, menthol. Who knows if there's any CBD in there, and who knows if you're feeling anything. In the case of edibles, people are taking a gummy loaded with sugar before they go to sleep, and then they're wondering why they're not falling asleep. I mean, you do the math. So we have a very, very holistic approach about this.
Do you guys do shows like events where you talk about or even sell CBD? Can you sell CBD at marketing events and things like that?
Most of them, yes.
Yeah.
Most of the events we do. We've done maybe a few where it's just handing out information. That's how we measure our success at these events is, one, how much information can we give out? Because we know our information is truthful and helpful to people. And two is how many bottles can we sell?
Yeah.
Just want to reintroduce. This is Max Sobel. This is Stephen Wallman. Max and Stevens. You see it here. Premium hemp extracts. We're talking about CBD. We're talking about the industry in general. Can you take CBD on an airplane?
Yes.
Yes.
TSA just changed that in June, July?
I think so.
June or
Why,
July.
why did TSA change that? Was there some type of effort towards TSA that
There must have been, because
have.
a lot of consumers are traveling with it, and a lot of people have it. So there was issues, I would imagine, at the agents being questioned. What is this product, and confiscating it to a point where it was important enough for them to make an announcement.
So before you mentioned that it's safe for kids and for pets, let's get back to that for a minute, because like I said, or we talked about in the beginning of this conversation, there is some skepticism maybe based on lack of knowledge about this industry in general. Do you ever get any pushback? If you tell somebody that CBD is great for your kid or it's safe for your kid, do you ever get any pushback with that conversation?
We very rarely don't get pushback to that conversation.
Yep.
People look at us rather odd and feel that we're drug dealers or trying to push drugs on them, per se.
Really? I mean, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, this is a serious conversation we're having.
Yeah, I
here,
mean,
right?
we typically pop up when we do our marketing events. They're in places that aren't cannabis events. So we do a bridal show, we do motorcycle shows, car shows, seafood festivals, wine festivals, community events, anywhere where there are people there that we can expose them to a positive message about the plant is where we pop up.
We typically don't do CBD-centric events because there's a lot of questionable product, in our opinion, out there, and we don't want to be competitive in a field of questionable products. You know what I mean? And that's how we sort of interpret it. Now, interestingly enough, on the pet side, people are very open to using it for their pets, especially as they're starting to see the benefits.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I can tell you a personal story.
Okay.
I have a 17-pound Shih Tzu who suffers from separation anxiety. He's a cute little guy named Rufus, but put a couple drops on his treats before I leave the house, and it keeps him from ripping up the door, and it works. We also just recently partnered with a company that actually does canine training, and they take it very seriously. They've actually brought the product in, and they've done extensive testing across all sorts of breeds and such with our product specifically. So,
can you buy CBD at medical marijuana places?
Well, that's a good question, and there's a caveat, yes and no. Not behind the counter. Once you go through the medical dispensary gate, I guess if you show your medical ID, behind there, that's all the medical program. Some of them have a separate gift shop or in the lobby where you can
center.
purchase it at the dispensary. So there are a few that yes, you can.
Do you put your product in? Where do you put your product? Do you have deals with retailers where you can actually go to a store and buy?
Medical dispensaries specifically, yes. We have a few that are partnered up with us, and they keep our product in their wellness center / lobby. And then we also have deals, obviously, with wholesalers and distributors and other people that resell our product.
Yeah, and our main focus has actually been chiropractors,
Yeah.
and acupuncturists, massage therapists, and wellness experts, people that have relationships with their patients that they can help advise them because they're getting the questions about it. So we've been really targeting our efforts a lot on those types of wellness experts as opposed to dealing directly with the consumer. Is we have a wholesale program, which is really where our growth is coming from, and will over this next year.
Walgreens, Rite Aid, CVS.
We're not
right?
interested in being on the shelves there. Right?
But do they sell CBD?
Yes.
Yes, they do.
Most of them do. I haven't done a latest, but I think all of them have some form of CBD on a label of products in there.
They have distributor relationships in place, and a lot of those distributors push a lot of the relationships they already have with either manufacturers of CBD products or manufacturers of other products that happen to add SKUs of CBD to existing things.
So I'm sure any of those places that I just mentioned don't want to sell a quote-unquote bad product.
Right.
So
Right.
those are those are good products that they're selling? I mean, they're tested. I mean, they're tested like you're tested, or what do you think?
None of them are tested like us, and I've looked at them all, and I always do a comparison. If someone's currently using one of a certain brand product, send it. I can do an analysis. Be happy to do that. But most of them are larger companies. They made larger investments, and they want to corner the market with a specific, intellectual property, if you will, of a formula. And we're not saying it's good or not good. We just don't know. So for us, we just deliver the pure plant in the bottle. Everything else you'll find out is somewhat formulated. And it just none of it is necessarily proven one way or another. So it is just buyer beware. We say that over and over again. I can't say it's not good because people get relief from it, and that's the important part, is that people are getting relief. But you have to look at a lab report.
Mm-hmm. We're more of a small batch, craft brewery type of product. We have a following. We have very loyal people who use our product. They love it. That's not to say that we wouldn't have a discussion with a potential opportunity, but we definitely never want to compromise our values or our standards. That's incredibly important to us. Again, our names and faces are on this product. It's a big deal.
Right. You've been, literally.
Yeah, literally.
You've been in business you've been in business for about 3 years. The first 2.5 years was spent researching the product in the industry.
Yes.
You launched your first batch, actually,
Yes.
in March of 2019.
Yes.
So it's only been about, 6 or 7 months now, 7 or 8 months.
Right.
How many batches have you actually launched in the last 7 or 8 months?
We're in batch 3 now, which is coming to the end. We're ready for batch 4.
We're almost ready for batch 4.
We're starting that process now.
How long between batches, or does it depend?
It depends on how fast we can sell it, and how fast. That's
How big is a batch? Like how many? You know what? And Max, why don't you take the little vial out here?
Sure.
Like how many of these that Max is going to take out and show are in a batch?
That's a great question. We typically do, and the batches have actually gotten larger. Our first batch was 1,000. And we've grown from there, but they're still small batches,
And so this is how much?
That's it's 10 milliliters is the liquid measurement, but there's 500 milligrams or more of CBD in there. And that's just how it's measured. Standard in the industry is CBD, but because ours is not to throw a major term, but a full spectrum extract, which is the whole plant. The CBD is just one of the molecules. The rest of it isn't even reflected on the label, but is in the lab report.
So there's 500 milligrams
At
of
least.
CBD in here.
At least.
Right.
So each batch gets tested individually, and there's always, by our standards, has to be at least 500 milligrams.
And how many milligrams is a serving of CBD? What do you take?
Right. So a full milliliter should contain around 50 milligrams. So we suggest a smaller serving of 1/4 of a milliliter, which is around 12 to 15 milligrams.
So if there's 500 milligrams in here and you suggest a serving of about 12 to 15, you've got about 40 servings
Correct.
at your suggestion in here.
Right. That's exactly
How often should people take this product?
You say as needed, and it depends on the condition, but it's better to take smaller servings throughout the day than it is to take one larger serving. And there's also there's a concept of biphasic with cannabis. So you can use a little bit and get a result, and use a lot of it and you get a different result. So there's a real need for a person to find out where their sweet spot is. So we always suggest to start with a small amount, use it throughout the day, and see what you notice over the week, or see what you don't notice.
And it also depends on what you're trying to solve for. So, for example, if you're solving for things like stress and anxiety, you probably want to take it sublingually. If you're dealing with things like pain and inflammation, you want a combination of both sublingual and topical. If you're dealing with some sort of digestive issues or something like that, you probably want to digest it, so you want to mix it with food or swallow it directly. And you want to make sure that it's fat-soluble food. That's important.
So I just want to make sure when you say topical, like if you actually have a physical something happening on your skin, if it's a wart or if it's a bump or maybe a teenager has acne, I'm just throwing things out. These are all things that you could suggest that they could benefit from CBD.
Yes.
So typically it's pain management. That's what we hear most commonly. So if a person has a sore spot, typically 2-3 drops on the affected area, rubbed in, absorbed really well, and it gives them relief. At least we've heard.
And it's more of like, can it do, will it do, or why is there a need to use it? If someone's currently in a situation where they need something else, if they're using something that's not working, or if they're using something that has terrible side effects, that's typically when people look for an alternative, and we would suggest it.
I do want to throw in one thing, and we've talked about some of the anecdotal things that have happened with
Yeah.
a lot of our customers. So Stephen and I, for the last 2+ years, we've been bringing home formulas. Our entire families and our pets and his kids, everybody has been the guinea pigs. We've all been trying it. It was only in March is when we sort of were really happy with what we got back, and that's when we really said, okay, this is the one. This is the one that we're comfortable getting the test done and branding. Just to be clear, we've been using our product and we love it.
Well, and that brings me to my next question. So
Yeah.
you both use it.
Yes.
Okay, what do you use it for, Max?
So me, thank God, I don't suffer from any kind of chronic pain, but I do use it situationally. So when I have a headache, for example, I'll take about a quarter dropper under my tongue, and I've timed it. My headache goes away in 8 minutes. I also use it in the morning, sometimes in the evening, just to sort of set my day in the right direction, for lack of a better word. My wife uses it for stress and anxiety. As I said, my dog uses it, so
Okay.
that's my...
Steve, what about you?
Yeah, me is for more joint pain. I have a lot of inflammation in joints, and I was on anti-inflammatories for years, and they weren't working as much, and they had to increase my serving and dosage of it, and that's what sort of led me down the road to looking to see if CBD was going to be helpful. So that's what I use it for. I use it under my tongue, and I use it topically.
Okay, so I run. From time to time, I get some knee pain, some joint pain. I've seen a doctor about it. It's not the worst thing in the world. I did tear my meniscus a few months ago. I could take it for just regular knee pain that I have from running.
It's always great to try because it's safe. There's no side effects.
Non-psychoactive, non-addictive.
There's no lethal dose. It's worth trying before some of the other harmful things that do have side effects.
And
That's what I always see.
if I had some knee pain, would I apply it topically or would I
Both.
Both.
both under my tongue and topically?
Correct.
Yeah.
If you get in a daily regimen of taking it sublingually twice a day, you can then apply it topically as needed throughout the day and as often as you need.
Which actually brings up an
is
important
fascinating.
point, which is one of the biggest misconceptions that we hear all the time, and we always want to make sure we talk about it, which is drug testing, because people get drug tested. A lot of
Yeah.
government workers,
Right. Oh, true.
truck drivers are the two main ones that we hear often that are really strictly regulated on their urine. So if they have a THC showing up in it, depending on the level, they could lose their job, their clearance or whatnot. Also, professional sports as well. I think Major League Baseball just made an announcement recently
Right.
about changing that. But from what we've learned from our studies and talking with the analytical chemists in the labs that make the product, you can extract THC, but not 100% of it from any product. So there is a risk for anyone who's ingesting any cannabis product that THC can build up in their body and at some point fail urinalysis.
Because we hear all the time people saying to us, I just bought CBD and it says 0% THC in it, so I was told I will not fail a drug test kind of thing.
Right. So the lab may show 0, but the urinalysis over time could build up in the body. Everyone metabolizes it differently. So we want to make sure anyone that is in that situation to safely, obviously speak to someone else. Hopefully they can change the rules around it. But if you are in that situation, only use it topically because it won't be in your bloodstream at that point.
Just for educational purposes, what is the THC level that above that level it's considered marijuana and below that level it's considered?
It's 0.3% from
0.3.
the lab test of the product, of the plant or the whatever finished product you have. But the urinalysis that's tested on the body, they test different levels depending on who's testing it. And that's the hard part where no one really knows. Some people have said they've taken an isolated CBD molecule with no THC in it, but somehow have failed a urinalysis and have used the product over time. So we just like to make sure people know, regardless of what the lab test shows from the cannabis product, there's still a risk of a urinalysis if you're in that group.
We have a lot of happy customers that use it topically. In fact, a lot of our chiropractor partners recommend that to some of their patients.
Why did you go to chiropractors particularly?
Well, I use chiropractic care. I mean, I'm a fan of it, and I know that pain and inflammation is a big part of their business.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
And they actually touch their patients,
Yeah.
and they're allowed to touch their patients, and it's safe for them. They're not prescribing anything else.
Right. What about physical therapists?
Same
Have
thing.
you-
Same thing, yeah.
We give them the tools, we give them the means, we educate them, we come in, we do trainings, we give them a lab report, we just help them help their patients.
Has the American Medical Association? I'm going to throw a whole bunch
Sure,
of
no
acronyms
problem.
out at you. The AMA, the American. What do they say about CBD, or have they said anything?
I mean,
about
we
CBD?
haven't spoken to them personally,
Yeah.
but most of the time they want to see clinical trials. In order for them to feel safe and put their reputation behind it, they're going to need to see a little bit more. Obviously, obviously than we would. We put our personal reputation up. But that's typically what they'll get. Is there's no clinical trials and proof that this is work and effective. So we're going to pretty much stay away from it.
What about the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration? What do they say?
Well, it's inevitable. I mean, the FDA will be coming down and regulating this at this point, at some point rather, and we're
And I think
prepared
it's
for
still
that.
Open. They're still open for comments on their regulations. So FDA is currently looking at how to regulate it and what they should do.
Our opinion is if we build a company above board and we do everything properly and we properly lab test and we're completely transparent, we're completely prepared for it. So,
Do you guys have a lobby?
In Maryland or federally?
Well,
Well, we support the Hemp Industry Association.
so at the federal level, we're members of the organization that's supposed to help us in that regard. But statewide, as I mentioned before, we're not prepared yet because I don't think there's a state organization that's developed specifically in Maryland yet.
Yeah, there is one, I believe, that will be in this session. So, it's important. And we don't just do business in Maryland, so other states as well. We're involved in getting those associations, at least getting involved. And there is important.
And we're very familiar with the lobby side of things. I mean, this isn't our first rodeo in that regard, so.
Gotcha. So I was reading a while back that in this coming General Assembly session in 2020, they will not be putting the legalization of marijuana on the docket for the state of Maryland.
Recreational, you mean?
Correct. When they do, which they eventually will, does that help or hurt your industry? Does it not have an effect at all?
I mean, I'm sure it'll impact, but from what we're focused on, which is the health practitioners and the general population in this area, Maryland, D.C., Virginia, Pennsylvania, the more products that we can bring and the better it is for those consumers. Right now, we can deliver a hemp product, which has limited conditions without the THC, so there's some conditions it can be helpful for. The more access that people have to the plant, in our opinion, is the better it's going to be.
And it's a very symbiotic effect between marijuana and hemp, in our opinion. I mean, it's one of those things where people can get benefits from different things.
So much more to talk about.
Yeah.
What's the main takeaway that you want the listener / potential consumer to take from this conversation?
The main takeaway is cannabis is a healthy plant for humans. It's designed to work by nature together with humans and pets, and try it.
For us, so the hardest part about this business was actually putting ourselves out there with our names and faces. The branding
I
of
can
this is a
imagine.
difficult thing.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you have a reputable product behind it. And I think the biggest takeaway is that if you're a person thinking about CBD, interested in CBD, you probably want to go with a reputable company, somebody that you can trust, and we're there for you. We're here to answer questions and educate.
Yeah, our phone number rings both of our phones, by the
Yeah.
way, so we're always available.
What do you think the future is?
The future, I think it's going to be an open door soon. Within 5 or 10 years, they'll have more research done as legalization changes. There'll be more information about it. My hope is that it doesn't get too corrupted by big business, and it can stay more boutique like it is now, grassroots industry where people are really putting everything they have into growing their businesses.
I was going to ask. I mean, do you know? Are there any publicly traded companies that are in your business right now?
Yes.
Yes, there are.
Yes,
Okay.
there are.
Yes,
So
there are.
already big businesses already started.
yeah.
They are, yes. And it's been, if you look at the market, they've really taken a beating this year. It's early stage, so, 5-10 years down the road will be a different story as typically things get,
And they have
consolidated.
And they have unlimited resources, so,
They can withstand.
And we get that question. So, you're Max and Steven. How can you scale this business? You're going to end up on shelves here, there. I mean, we're a boutique business. So once us is everything. Our reputation is everything, and us interacting with consumers is the big part for us.
I'll take it completely back around. When you first asked us about, how we met each other and why
Yeah.
we work, so we share one thing in common: flexibility and adaptability. We understand that we're going to have to move this business in the direction that it needs to go when it needs to go in that direction. And most common question we get is, "Will you make bigger bottles?" Or and that's a good question, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we understand that we have to be flexible and available to move in whatever direction this industry takes us, and we're prepared.
We've spent 45 minutes talking about this. I told you guys before, and I seriously mean this. We could spend all day talking about this. Just questions off the top of our heads. If we had callers right now, my God, the phone lines would absolutely
All right,
be
great.
lit up. Guys, listen, thank you so much.
Thank you
Max
very much.
Sobel, Steve Wallman, the product, you see it right here, Max and Stevens Premium Hemp Extracts. Quite an interesting conversation and a very interesting industry. Congratulations on you guys being in it.
you.
Thank
Best
you.
of luck to you both.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Thank you
Thanks,
for having
sounds
us.
good. We appreciate this.
Absolutely. And that'll be it for our podcast today. Again, we want to remind you that this is the J. Moore Innovations in Health series. We'll have 2 more coming up in January, February of 2020. We are brought to you by Nemphos Brow, the area's finest boutique corporate law firm. They specialize in supporting corporate growth at every stage of business. Nemphos Brow specializes in corporate, business, startup, and entrepreneurial law. Check them out online, nemphosbrow.com. I'm Gary Stein. Glenn Clark, you're an excellent producer. Thank you. Max, Steve, all the best.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Thank
You too.
You too.
Happy holidays.